And thanks for joining us today on the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Greg Stone, Metro Campus Provost, here with Dr. Leigh Goodson. How are you, Dr. Goodson?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well, and our guest today is Dr. Alicia MacKay, Assistant Professor of Psychology and here at the Metro Campus, and
General Education
General Ed Coordinator. And I'm very excited. I was trying to think of how to put this. We'll just keep going. We'll keep going. We'll keep this one going. I already messed up once. It's been fun. Yeah. And Alicia and I, Dr. MacKay and I, co-chair the Gen Ed Committee of the Academic Affairs Council. So appreciate you coming in and sort of sharing with a few more people what you and I get to talk about on a rather regular basis, which is Gen Ed and Gen Ed redesign and how our Gen Ed program is starting to come together in this new council structure. So maybe just give us a bit of background from your perspective about what Gen Ed has been like at Tulsa Community College in the past, and what do most faculty and staff, and especially students, seem to think of when we talk to them about Gen Ed?
Okay. Well, currently at TCC, and it's not just at TCC, but most colleges and universities, it's considered a distribution model where students are basically just told how many courses to take from science, from math, from English, and all the other disciplines and departments within the Gen Ed curriculum. And so because of that, it's seen as kind of a checklist, a set of hoops they have to jump through to kind of get to the information that they really want to know and do that's related to their chosen career path. So most students really don't understand why they're taking their courses. I would argue that most faculty do understand the purpose and value of Gen Ed, but as far as articulating it sometimes to our students, that can become a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So tell us what Gen Ed is going to look like in the future, and how will it, it'll be a new model, yes?
Yes.
And as you begin building this new framework, what does that mean for students? Will their experience be different from the checklist that they perceive now?
I hope so. We want to move away from that model and be really transparent with our students and finding ways to connect our Gen Ed curriculum to our institutional learning outcomes, because Gen Ed is one way to ensure that all of our students reach their learning outcomes. And so being really transparent and finding ways to let students know why they're taking each of their courses. And right now we're looking at different models from our transfer partners and other institutions across the country and how they do that. So we've got some really good examples of how this is done. So we're in the beginning stages right now of trying to propose models to see what would work best for our students.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the sake of our conversation and other people who might listen, Alicia and I, along with Chandra Carpenter and Deanna Cooper, two other faculty members who are on our Gen Ed committee, and we'll talk about the committee in a few minutes, but we had a great opportunity to go to the Innovation Summit from the League for Innovation at Community Colleges last summer, and started to just have some team time to flesh out some options for what frameworks might look like. But one of the conclusions that we came to was making sure that everybody, both faculty, all faculty, staff, and students know that Gen Ed is not just that thing to check off a list, and it's not the barrier to keep you from the courses that you want to take. Gen Ed is what helps you be best prepared for those courses that you want to take in your major program or in your workforce program.
So it's those kind of foundational skills and knowledge that you should know. And it's going to be kind of a culture shift, not just for faculty, but also staff, and the language that we use. You think about advisement, not telling our students, oh, okay, well, just get your math course out of the way. It's really kind of changing how we perceive those and how we, relay that information to our students.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that. So what's that going to mean? I mean, I don't think we know the answers to any of these questions yet, but what will that mean when a student, we hear about community colleges are a place to go get your basics. Some people talk about that. And for those of us who are here at TCC, we know that is really only about 5 or 10% of what our purpose in life might be. Or I think about concurrent enrollment, where students may be trying to get a few, quote, gen eds out of the way. What will that mean for, because we won't really be in that same exact space the way we were, yes?
Right. I mean, obviously we will still have students coming here to, complete their gen ed coursework.
Right.
But I think finding ways to make it more meaningful to students to see, okay, it's not just a math course. You are able
Right.
to achieve these skills, and find ways to help students market themselves better. And, you know, now they know a set of skills that they could put on their resume because of their gen ed courses. So just finding ways to make all of those connections across, you know, their academic, their personal, and their professional life.
What a tremendous value added to the education that you get here at Tulsa Community College.
Right. It's as much a change in mindset
It is,
as it is a
really.
change in procedures or practices. I
Right.
mean, not that there won't be some, you know, intentional work that happens to connect courses together or to sort of build this framework and give us all a new visual sense of what gen ed is. It's not just that one page in the catalog. But it is largely about changing the mindset that people have
Well-
and how they find value in their gen ed courses.
Well, and how they're tied to the college also. I mean,
Right.
once they come in, they may think they were coming in to check some boxes, and then they get involved in it, and they understand what they're really into. I would think it would really change the perception of the college as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the function of the Gen Ed committee, because this is a fairly new committee. We're just in our first year. And we've had Gen Ed coordinators in the past. Dr. Sherry Hughes, who was a longtime faculty member, served in that role for a while, but for many years there really hasn't been a group of people. So tell us a little bit about the Gen Ed committee under the Academic Affairs Council, who's on it, and what's the committee been working on. And I'll pretend like I don't know, since I'm sitting on that
You're
committee.
doing a really good job pretending. Yeah, okay.
Yes, Greg and I are the co-chairs of the committee, and I had, when I first applied for the coordinator position, I had asked to have a committee to work with, because I thought it was important to have faculty representation from all of the disciplines that are covered within our Gen Ed curriculum, as they're going to be the best to kind of voice what purpose each of those areas serve within the curriculum. So other members of our committee for each area, we have Beverly Bailey, who is from Communications, Chandra Carpenter, Biology, Deanna Cooper, First Year Experience Seminar, Perry Montgomery is from Nursing, Lance Phillips with Math, Sydney Pokris from Political Science, Heidi Riggert, Fine Arts, Stephen Woods, Humanities, and Stephanie Youngblood and Paul Zentgraf from English. And then we also have Dr. Jennifer Ivey from Institutional Research and Assessment, and Pat Green as well from Workforce.
Nice. That's a nice committee.
So, I mean, we need a few more, I think. It's not quite big enough. I think we will, though, honestly, be adding more as we continue to progress through the work that we're doing, adding somebody from, Greg and I had recently mentioned somebody from Student Advisement to do that, whoever's sadly replacing Cindy Marshall
Right.
to help with articulations, because any changes that we make within the Gen Ed curriculum, we want to make sure it doesn't impact any articulations that we have.
Well, I'm Leigh Goodson here with my co-host, Dr. Greg Stone, and you're listening to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Alicia MacKay, and we've been talking about TCC's General Education Committee and her work as the committee chair, where she co-chairs that with Dr. Stone. So talk to us about what are the connections between Gen Ed and assessment. You said Dr. Jennifer Ivey is on the committee with you all, and how does that fit together?
So for us, Gen Ed is one way for us to ensure that all of our students are meeting the institutional learning outcomes. Since every student who's receiving a degree has to take at least 18 hours of general education courses, it's one way that we touch a majority of our students. So it's not that we're adding an additional layer of assessment, it's just a new way to look at how we might assess our institutional learning outcomes, not just within programs, but also thinking about how our courses also play a role within the Gen Ed curriculum. Because as a psychology faculty member, until we started the Pathways work, I was always more concerned, or really didn't even, not that I wasn't concerned with Gen Ed, but my focus was how does my course contribute to the psychology program itself, not the fact how does it contribute to the Gen Ed curriculum. So having those conversations across departments, I think will be really useful, and we're seeing a change with the Pathways work, and those opportunities have started to come up to have those conversations.
So we talked a little bit about moving away from the distribution model to some other new kind of framework, and that the committee is sort of exploring what some of those might look like, and how, you know, some of the work that we're doing that we haven't mentioned, you know, the committee is working now to update and define our gen ed attributes to make sure that those are in line with our transfer partners, because it's been a while since some of those have been defined clearly or have been
Ever defined.
or ever defined in some cases. But talk maybe for a few minutes about bigger picture. Like where do you envision that gen ed is going to be 5 years or 10 years from now? What's that going to look like, in addition to hopefully the mindset changes that we've already talked about?
So one point that I keep bringing up when I talk to people about our work on the Gen Ed Committee is the idea of equity. Since we do touch most of our students, this is one way to ensure equity as far as educational experience. And as a committee, we created a survey for faculty. And on that survey, it was just emailed yesterday, so if you got the email, please make sure that you complete it if you're a faculty member. And so within that survey, we're asking faculty what do they think would be an important component of the gen ed curriculum. So on there, we have some high impact practices such as service learning, undergrad research, because I think it's important that students, independent of their major, should be exposed to these opportunities, and gen ed is a great place to get those experiences. So that's kind of like my lofty goal, is that we would have these opportunities built in within the gen ed curriculum. And so maybe they can have them, several times as they get their degree, not just within their program, but maybe even outside of their chosen major, and that would be a great experience for them as well. So that's kind of my lofty goal, but also looking at co-curricular opportunities, so working with somebody from student affairs and student life. We know that learning takes place not just within the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, and how to kind of incorporate that those experiences for our students so they can see how it all applies in what they like to always say, the real world, and kind of make those connections too.
Makes sense. So it's really very exciting in terms of where we're headed with, and this didn't necessarily come up just because of Pathways. It's part of it, but it didn't really grow out of that. Where did it really start?
I'd say within the last 5 years or so, colleges around the country are really, because as Greg mentioned,
it's really the movement.
Yeah, it's been, nobody's really looked at it for a long time, and so everybody's kind of looking at redesigning it, the gen ed curriculum and programs to make it more meaningful for students.
And universities are doing this also.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of innovation going on, excuse me, in terms of what gen ed programs look like and how students are able to demonstrate that work. I mean, there's also, and the phrase is escaping me, Alicia, at the moment, but sort of post-course work. It's not, there's sort of
signature work.
Signature work, thank you, which a lot of institutions, particularly four-year universities and some community colleges, are engaging in. That students at the end of a program, a gen ed program, their coursework, sort of provide some sort of artifact that they've constructed over the course of that coursework that, again, allows the institution and most importantly the student, him or herself, to be able to assess all of these skills that they've acquired in their gen ed coursework. So there are really interesting things going on out there, but maybe
really
also
making the whole bigger than the sum of the parts.
That's absolutely
Exactly.
that's absolutely right. In fact, Alicia and a few members of our gen ed committee just got back from an institute with
AAC&U's General Education and Assessment conference just last week. And so it was a great opportunity to see. They had representatives from community colleges and larger universities to see some that are the same place that we are, just starting the process of gen ed redesign, some that are 4 or 5 years into it, to kind of see all the different models that they're using for redesign of gen ed and also assessment purposes. So it was very useful, and we'll be sharing our results with the committee when we meet next week.
Nice. Well, we have one more question, and it's the big question,
Okay.
Dr. MacKay. It's if you could go back in time and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice before you started college, what would it be?
Mine would be not to be afraid to ask for help. When I entered the university, I came from a small town. High school was really easy for me. My homework was in art class, and I had a 6-month-old child, and I was a single mom. And I didn't know who to ask for help, and I wanted to kind of prove to everybody that I could do it, and so I didn't ask for help, and it would have obviously helped me a lot had I reached out for resources. And then also, as soon as possible, find something that you're passionate about and get involved in the college, not just going there to take classes and then leaving. So finding at least one experience to become involved, whether it's a student organization or of research or working in the library, whatever it might be, find a way to get involved in the college as well.
And you've told me that story before. You were a young mother, a very young mother, and how much your family helped you
Yes.
with that. And that's just such a inspiration, to have that support system around and be able to ask for help. So that's great advice. Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening today to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest has been Dr. Alicia MacKay, and thanks for your time as well, Alicia. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll see you tomorrow in our Gen Ed meeting.
Yes, sir.
The work never ends,
the work
does
never
it?
ends. No, it doesn't.
You've been listening to the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Leigh Goodson with my co-host here, Dr. Greg Stone, and we've really enjoyed talking with Dr. Alicia MacKay. Thank you for spending time with us today, Dr. MacKay. And we want to thank you for listening. Remember, you can catch the Big Blue Podcast each week in the week at TCC and on the Creativity channel at YouTube. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.